Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if ANBU Captain Naruto secretly dating Mikoto and married her, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. As the clouds parted, it allowed the moonlight to engulf the woods of Hai no Kuni. The tree crowns masked any presence as the green leaves shielded anything beneath it from the bright light emitting from the beautiful full moon. Beneath the crowns of the trees, if you looked closely enough, however, and tried to spot it, you could see two dark blurs, racing across the forest on the large branches of the many trees making up the forest of this country. Both wore the same black cloak with a hood covering their heads, but almost everything else was completely different. The one on the right was a teen with deep onyx eyes with long black hair made into a ponytail, except for the two bangs that framed his face, which was covered by a porcelain mask resembling a weasel. The one on the left was a teen just like this partner, but his appearance was quite different. He was quite a tall teen for his age, with medium-length spiky blonde hair and sparkling azure eyes. His face was also covered by one of these porcelain masks. The difference was just that instead of resembling a weasel, his mask resembled that of a raven. The one on the right raised his hand, signaling for a halt at the next branch, on which they landed on with ease. "You ready for this, Raven?" he asked, his tone calm and almost monotone sounding. "You know, it's only the two of us here, Itachi," the one on the left side as he moved his mask into the palm of his hand, showing his facial features. The one identified as Itachi removed his mask as well. "You do know that it is part of the ANBU code to always wear our masks and go by our code names in the field, even if it is just the two of us, right, Naruto-kun?" Itachi sighed and put his mask back in place. Naruto groaned at the mention of the rules and placed his mask back in place. Yeah, whatever man. Just because it's the rules, doesn't mean I have to like them. It still means that you have to follow them, though," Itachi countered, and Naruto groaned in annoyance. "Afraid so let's get this over with anyway. What's the plan again?" Naruto asked as he crouched down to stare at the camp located in a clearing about 100 feet away from them. Itachi crouched down beside him and looked the camp over as his eyes turned red with 3 onyx tomo spinning in each. The Sharingan, also known as the Uchiha clan's precious bloodline limit. "I spot 10 guards, which is quite low, especially since this is such a high-value target. Considering their low numbers, there are quite a few things that can be the cause," Itachi informed. "Yeah, like the assholes being stronger than mere guards, and more like shinobi in terms of strength," Naruto added on, to which Itachi nodded. "Correct. That is indeed a possibility, but on the flip side, our target might as well be going bankrupt, and this could be the only thugs he could afford," Itachi stated as he flipped a kunai into his hand. Naruto sighed as he reached in and grabbed a kunai that would look odd to most people. It was a tri-pronged kunai, with a red wooden handle instead of the classic metal one that the usual kunai supported. But as always, we'll never figure it out unless the missions go bad and are categorized as foobar. It's quite sad really. Unless the situation calls for it, we can never really go all out, Naruto mumbled to himself. Itachi gave a quiet chuckle as he looked to his side to stare at his blonde friend. "If that truly was a problem for you, then you would never have joined the ANBU. I know, but still, we have to do everything so silent and quiet. It takes some of the fun out of it. Like right now, we'll never know these guys' true strength. They could either be Junin level in strength with some impressive skills, or some lowlife thugs for all we know," Naruto said as he rose back up from his crouched position. Itachi nodded, somewhat agreeing with him. Despite being a pacifist, there was some excitement to the unknown at times. But he also feared it. Being left in blind could be quite horrifying to some extent. The ANBU's job is to do things efficiently and quietly. It won't do us, or our village any good if we make this into some huge spectacle. Itachi informed the blonde, but Naruto just found Itachi's lecturing to be quite annoying. He knew this already. He had gone into the ANBU as a trainee as he had, and on the same squad at that. They had both been through the ANBU's upstart protocol together, so why was it that Itachi always felt the need to lecture him? But still, you do realize that it's doubtful that they are a group of Junin, suppressing their chakra levels all the way to bandits. So keep your bloodlust down, you're going to reveal us, and if you do, I'm leaving the paperwork to you. Why is it you always feel the need to lecture me about everything? We went through the ANBU program together in case you've forgotten it. Naruto shivered, calming himself down as Itachi went up from his crouched position. Itachi clapped Naruto's shoulder and chuckled, because if you are anything like your mother, then you can get reckless if you don't agree with certain things. I'm just doing my job as your partner, and that in your case involves me making sure that you stick to the rules. And then he shunshined away. Naruto shook his head as he performed the shunshin as well. Itachi might be his best friend, but damn, the guy needed to chill sometimes. It wasn't like he had magically forgotten the importance of being ANBU, and what responsibilities that came with wearing these masks. In the camp, things were quiet. Naruto crouched down in a bush as he slowly sneaked forward behind the first guard. Judging from the man's chakra level, he was around the level of a thug. So unless the gods decided to punish them for whatever reason, the mission should be a piece of cake. The blonde flew up from behind the man and held him in a chokehold with his arm, cutting off any oxygen from reaching his lungs. The man struggled quite a bit with his legs spasming as the blonde dragged him to a bush, where his suffering ended with a quick twist and a broken neck. Itachi was having an easy time as well. One of the perks of having the Sharingan was that a simple look in the eyes was enough to immobilize someone through the use of genjutsu. So, with a simple glance, and dragging one out of the clearing to slit his throat in his dazed state, he plowed through his guard. The 8 remaining guards were handled within 2 minutes, and the duo nodded to each other before quietly sneaking into the tent of their target. Inside, an obese middle-aged man with short gray hair sat up in his bed, as he noticed that all the commotion from earlier was gone. "What's going on out there? I hope that none of you are sleeping on the job." He grunted while standing up. He pushed the tent front open and stared around the clearing. It was empty. There wasn't a single trace of any of his men that he had hired to keep him safe at all. It was silent, empty. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air without making a sound. To think I paid them for this, where the hell did they even go? He raged as he stormed around to enter his tent. But he quickly spotted something that made his blood freeze. Within spitting distance stood a man clad in a black cloak and a mask. The only noticeable feature about him was the piercing blue eyes. "They're preparing for your arrival," the man stated simply, and before he could scream, he felt a jolt of pain and it got hard to breathe. He looked down with shaking movement and stared at the blade that was piercing his chest as his face went pale and he collapsed forward. Naruto scoffed as he sidestepped so he wouldn't get hit by the disgusting man. "You know, you could have killed him and pushed him to the side instead. I don't really appreciate getting touched by such a pig." As the corpse finally fell to the ground, it revealed Itachi standing behind with a bloodied sword. "At least his blood is on my sword, and not yours. I'd say I took the worse end of the deal this time." Groaning, the blonde waved his hand in front of his partner. "Whatever man, let's burn this place to the ground and return home. We've been hunting this drug lord kingpin wannabe the entire week, and I really feel like sleeping in my own bed for once." Naruto complained as he went inside the tent, followed by Itachi. Itachi gave a quiet HN as he looked at a crate that was placed beside the bedroll on the ground. For such a simple mission to take this long was quite unexpected. These guys weren't shinobi trained, but they still somehow managed to avoid us for 5 days. Naruto broke the crate open with a grunt, and said, "Well, that just proves that even weaklings without shinobi training can be exceptional in some ways." "I never said they couldn't or weren't," Itachi noted with a raised brow. I know, I'm just making conversation as we are about to blow up a crate filled with drugs that may or may not be explosive, without the tags." Naruto shrugged as if it was the simplest thing in the world and placed a couple of explosive tags on the inside of the crate. Itachi nodded. "I see, finish this quickly. I'll be waiting at the spot where we were, before we engage the enemy." "Sounds good," Naruto said and heard the tent front rustle as Itachi left the inside of the tent. Naruto took his mask off and placed it on the inside of his cloak as he did this. He really disliked having to wear the ANBU mask, but it was an efficient way to disguise yourself in this line of work. The blonde looked inside the crate and noticed a piece of paper that looked like an IOU showcasing a large amount of money. Moving it out of the way, he found a stack of money at the bottom. Raising a brow, he reached down and grabbed the stack of money held together by a little cloth wrap. When he had retrieved the bundle of money, he saw another bundle and chuckled. "Man, this criminal line of work must really pay well. This amount of money is what I get for doing an S-rank mission with a last-minute notice of deployment." Naruto thought to himself as he put the bundles inside his cloak and went out of the tent. The moment he stepped outside, he took his mask and placed it on his face again before shining up beside Itachi. "Hey man, look what I found." He chuckled and pulled one of the bundles of money out from his cloak. "Why did you take that? We were instructed to blow up the properties of the target." Itachi sighed as he stared at the cheerful blonde. Naruto waved his finger in front of his face and stuck the money inside his cloak again. "Actually, our orders were to blow up the drugs." Itachi shook his head with a small smirk. "Why did you take it again? It's not like you need money." "Meh, spoils of war." Naruto chuckled as the two leapt away from the scene as a massive explosion happened in the background. The journey back to their village, Konohagakure no Sato, had been fast and uneventful. Nothing had occurred, and the duo was able to retreat back to the Hokage's office by dawn without any trouble. The duo landed on the Hokage's floor and kneeled down. "Hokage-sama." They spoke simultaneously, and the old man turned around in his chair while puffing on a pipe. This was Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage, also known as the Professor due to various feats he had accomplished in the glory days of his prime. "At ease, you two, drop the masks," he ordered and lifted the pipe away from his mouth with a fond smile. The duo got up from their kneeling position on the floor, and moved the masks away from their faces, and settled for placing them at their hip for the time being. "Mission accomplished, Hokage-sama." Itachi then spoke. Hiruzen nodded and started to write on a piece of paper. "I trust everything went well, and the target dealing harmful drugs in Hai no Kuni has been eliminated, yes?" Naruto took this chance to speak. "Yes, the target has been eliminated, and the crate he was bringing with him was destroyed. Though, I decided to retrieve this from the crate," Naruto informed, and pulled the two bundles of money out of his cloak. Hiruzen nodded and took the two bundles and placed them in a drawer inside his desk. "Good job you two, this money will be used for the good of the village. And of course, the two of you will receive a generous bonus for bringing these much-needed funds to us. You are dismissed until further notice." The duo nodded and shunshined out of the office, and landed on top of the Hokage Tower, in which the Hokage's office was obviously located. I knew it was a good idea to bring the man's money with us. Naruto smirked as he leaned against the railing with his arms crossed. If you really needed the money, then why didn't you just keep it? Itachi chuckled as he leaned down and rested against the railing while looking over the village. I'm going to pretend you didn't just ask that, mister, all for the rules, Uchiha. But to humor you, I didn't want to be branded a traitor for keeping information from Oji-san, and it's also going to please him knowing we bring stuff like this to him. Think of it as an investment in his trust and backup in any future matters. Naruto said with a smirk. Itachi raised a brow at him and snorted, "You're smarter than you look." What was that? Naruto said with a tick mark throbbing on his forehead. Naruto, Itachi interrupted as he got up from his resting position, and looked at the blonde. Naruto grunted, not understanding what was going on. Itachi clapped him on the back and said, "My mother said she would like to invite you over for dinner after our mission was done. What she means is that ever since you got the duty of overlooking the various security seals within the village, while Jiraiya-sama is away, she is displeased with how little you grant us your presence." Naruto shivered at the thought. Mikoto could be really scary when she was angry with something, and he didn't even want to think about how scary she could be when she was mad about something. Yeah, I know, it just isn't really comfortable being in your home sometimes. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes while taking a deep breath. Itachi's brow went further upon his forehead. How come? Naruto opened his eyes and gave a snort. Don't tell me that the almighty Uchiha Itachi hasn't noticed how displeased his father is every time that I'm around. I don't know why, but I must have done something to upset him. I've noticed, but I don't think it has anything to do with you as a person, Itachi said in a monotone voice. Naruto's face adopted a confused look. How can it not be my fault? It isn't like he acts like that when I'm out of his sight. He does actually. I suspect it has something to do with him still having sour feelings left after the Yondaime Hokage selection where your father beat him to it. I've heard that Orochimaru was also displeased about the results. Itachi explained to the best of his abilities. Naruto snorted as he palmed his forehead. So, I get to take the blame for something my father has done. Great. That makes me feel so much better. Naruto said sarcastically while Itachi shook his head. Anyhow, my mother still wishes to see you for dinner. It would be delightful if you'd come. She misses seeing you around, and so does Sasuke. Shisui might also be there if that makes anything better for you. Itachi said with a small smile. Naruto sighed and stared at the blue skies above him. I'll think about it, but I want to go home and continue studying my father's notes. I almost have it. Sometimes I really wonder if Ka-san taught me the sealing she could, so I'd be working closely with To-san since he was always so busy at the office. Maybe she thought of it as a way to get me closer to him, because I was quite sad about never seeing him. Where does this come from? Itachi questioned. Naruto sighed again, and pushed off the railing he was leaning against. I don't know, it just comes out when I let my mind run loose. Dangerous mind you have then. Itachi meant as a joke, but Naruto just shrugged. Yeah, sometimes it gets the better of me. The sun was setting in the distance as Naruto made his way out of the T&I department with one Ibiki Morino in tow. Naruto rubbed his shoulder as he gave a short but relieved sigh. He was finally done for today and looked forward to a meal and some much-needed rest. I'm sorry for dragging you out of your home so late, but Inoichi thought that the security seals inside the interrogation cells might have been too outdated, but it seems like everything was alright, no? Ibiki asked with a grunt. Naruto turned around and looked at the man that had scars covering the majority of his face. Everything was quite alright, but the models are quite outdated compared to the one that has been placed at the ANBU holding cells. Ibiki nodded. I trust Hokage-sama will hear of this. and work on having some newer versions installed soon. He asked afterward. I'll bring it to his attention, yes. And I have little to no doubt that I'll be the one to set them up before the week is over, Naruto informed with a tired smile. That is pleasing news, I'll inform Inoichi of this. Good evening Naruto-san, Ibiki said with a small bow, slightly reveling in Naruto's displeasure before he returned inside. Naruto groaned in annoyance. Of course, this just had to happen. He had been on his way home after shopping and training for the day when a fellow ANBU member had told him that the T&I department needed a look, something that had taken a good 3 hours to finish. So, this is where you're hiding? A voice called out from above him. Naruto looked up as he noticed a form falling from above, and he took a step back when a teen with short black hair landed in front of him, Shisui-sama. He asked with a small wave of a hand. The one and only, Shisui smirked as he pointed a thumb at himself. Grunting, Naruto made his way down the stairs up to the T&I department, with Shisui following right after. Any reason you're interrupting my evening, Shisui? Well, Mikoto-sama feared that you might ditch dinner with Itachi and company, so she sent me to make sure that you're coming. It starts in 10 minutes, by the way. It took quite a while to hunt you down. Shisui informed him as they walked side by side through the streets of Konoha. I had work. Ibiki thought that some of the seals were broken in the T&I department, but they were just outdated. Naruto sighed as he walked up a few stairs to an apartment complex. Shisui rose a brow as he walked up behind the blonde. Why are you living here again? You have your family's estate. Memories, Naruto said simply, and opened the door to his apartment, and walked inside. Shisui walked in and closed the door after him, and watched Naruto for a few minutes as the blonde unsealed several scrolls filled with groceries and supplies, and then started to put them away in the fridge and cabinets after. You're coming, right? Mikoto-sama is going to skin me alive if I don't bring you back with me. Shisui asked, hopefully. Naruto sighed as he put a tray of eggs in the bottom of his fridge. It isn't really that welcoming for me, there. Mikoto-san might like me, but Fugaku-san resents the very sight, sound, or smell of me. Aren't you over-exaggerating a little bit? Shisui asked with a raised brow. He told me to be quiet last time I was over for breakfast because I talked with Itachi. He meant that I disturbed his reading of the morning papers. Naruto rolled his eyes after saying that. Shisui chuckled and sat down on a chair. That old man could just read that stuff on the toilet while doing the number 2. Naruto gave a few quiet chuckles. If I had said that, I would probably be banished from the clan grounds, instantly. Mikoto-sama wouldn't have allowed that. She's really fond of you, you know. Especially your friendship with Itachi, that makes her really happy. She has secretly told me, in confidence, that she was afraid Itachi might have had a harder time making friends, because of his father's actions during his early childhood. But then you and I showed up to save the day. Shisui said while inspecting a net filled with oranges. Wouldn't that make her fond of you as well? Naruto asked as he grabbed the net from Shisui's hand, and filled a glass bowl with the oranges and placed it on the circular wooden dining table Shisui was sitting at. Shisui rested his head on the palm of his hand. Meh, she thinks that I'm kind of a bad influence at times. What did you do to make her think so highly of you anyway? Perhaps it's because I'm less irresponsible than you. Naruto said. And then there was a moment of silence before they both roared out laughing. Come on, man. If she knew what kind of books you're hiding in here, then she'd kill you and feed you to Fugaku-sama. Shisui roared out laughing. That quickly shut Naruto up, because he was too busy feeling terrified. She would really kill him if she knew of his bad habit. His brother figure, Hitaki Kakashi, and his godfather, Jiraiya, had really corrupted him as he grew up. I should just burn those books, Naruto groaned and filled the bowl with some other leftover fruits from the week before that hadn't rotted away yet. Shisui faked a horrified look. No. You can't. Those books are my precious. If you want to throw them away, you could always just give them to me. Rolling his eyes, Naruto turned to stare at Shisui, and you question why she thinks of you as a bad influence. Don't be rude, I'm not the one ditching the family dinners. Shisui winked. Naruto started throwing the empty fruit nets out in a trash can placed in a cabinet under the sink. A family dinner is for family, I don't really qualify as that. Come on. If you aren't family, then what are you? Shisui said in an annoyed tone. The Uchiha clan, well, with the exception of Fugaku, all thought of Naruto as a friend of the family by now. The blonde was quite often present with Itachi after all, either for missions or training, so they had gotten quite familiar with him. Naruto didn't bother to give a response as he went over and turned off the lights. You coming? He asked and walked toward the door. Shisui grinned ear to ear and rushed out of the front door. I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Shisui smiled as he turned around only to get the front door smacked right in his face. And so he stood there, with a twitching eyebrow. He was about to knock on the door when it opened and Naruto walked out. I'm just kidding, no reason to look so pissed off. He smirked and locked the door and pocketed the key. That wasn't funny. Apologize. Shisui growled as he ran after the blonde, who had just slammed his front door in his face. Naruto gave a small smirk. No. Apologize. Shisui then yelled as he ran up beside him, to send death glares Naruto's way. Naruto laughed with a mischievous look. I said no, you moron, are you deaf? Apology. Wait, what? Moron. I'm not the one who slammed a door in my friend's face, and laughed about it like a. Shisui screamed as he made a motion to pull up his sleeve, which was quite ironic considering his black shirt was sleeveless, and attempted to punch Naruto in the face, but the blonde just ducked under it. Naruto was about to retort, when he heard a voice beside them. What's all this commotion about? Naruto gave a fleeting glance at the two familiar faces now watching them with amused looks. One was a female, about a head shorter than him, with long purple hair, brown eyes, red lips, whilst finishing her attire with an ANBU uniform. She was his former teammate on his Genin team, but now a teammate of his ANBU squad. One Azuki Yugao. The second one was a male who sported a brown, shoulder-length hair that framed both his face and brown eyes. He wore his forehead protector like a bandana, along with the standard Jonin outfit, and as always, he has his trademark Senbon in his mouth. This was Shiranui Genma, one former Junin sensei of Uzumaki Naruto Daizu. Naruto gave a smirk as he dodged another punch from Shisui with ease. Oh, it's just Shisui being overdramatic. It must be his time of the month. Yugao gave a soft giggle as Shisui's eyes flared red. Overdramatic. Now listen here, you little shit arg. Instead of getting his threat across, he got his mouth full of dirt. Shisui's head flew up from the ground, and he stared at his feet, noticing that he had just been tripped by the blonde as he was about to go for an attack. You about done yet? Naruto asked, failing to pull a Kakashi, as a smirk was steadily crawling onto his face. Shisui got back on his feet, with smoke pouring out of his ears. You're so dead, just you wait for it, shithead. Yeah, don't throw empty threats around, Shisui, it's embarrassing, Naruto said with a grin, making his former Genin team chuckle at the bickering duo. I'll show you empty threats, Shisui growled, but before he could do anything, he was interrupted by a cough from Genma. Not that it isn't funny watching you because, believe me, it is. Really. But I'd like to have a word with my former student here, before you try to kill him. Genma chuckled, making Shisui mumble something out of embarrassment. The young Uchiha scoffed, and crossed his arms over his chest. This isn't over, he mumbled while glaring at the blonde. It is though, Naruto winked, making Shisui's anger intensify even further. The blonde walked over and gave Genma a brief fist bump, as the older Junin gave a smirk in return. How's life treating ya? Naruto shrugged. It's fine I suppose, but I don't really have all evening to chat with you guys. The moron back there is dragging me to a family dinner at the Uchiha compound, and I'm sure Mikoto-san is going to kill me if I'm any more late than I already am. I see. Oh well, I won't hold you any longer then. Tell Itachi I said hi, and that it would be nice for the entire team to have a joint meal again soon. I'm paying if that helps anything. Genma offered with a weak smile. Yugao, however, gave a sadistic chuckle. Be careful about what you promise, sensei. Naruto might eat so much at the barbecue restaurant again that you go bankrupt for a week. And what if he gets drunk again? With the help of clones, you might be bankrupt for a month. That was one time, Naruto mumbled with a minor blush. Shisui, however, picked this time to roar out laughing, haha. You're a fat shit, aren't you? With how cheap the barbecue spot is, how the hell did you manage to eat so much, that the poor guy had no money left? If you don't shut up, I'll kill you before you can try to kill me, Naruto said, with his hair rising up, along with a deadly aura emitting from behind him. Shisui didn't pay any attention to that, and just wiped a tear away from his eye. Yeah, I'd like to see you try. That's it, I'm going to neuter you, and place a surprise in Fugaku's soup. Naruto muttered, and drew a kunai making Shisui gulp in surprise. Hey, stop that, we are out in the public. That's quite embarrassing you know, you're supposed to be an elite of the village, Naruto, but you aren't keeping your cool. I thought I taught you better. Genma lectured, making Naruto fall comically on the ground with a rain cloud pouring over his head. As Shisui was about to laugh his off, Genma stopped him. You aren't any better Shisui, you are known throughout the nations because of your title as Shunshin no Shisui. I would have thought you would carry yourself with a little more respect than this. But you are acting like an infant. Now it was Shisui's time to fall down beside Naruto with a rain cloud over his head. We're sorry, they mumbled together. Yugao looked at a watch hanging on the side of one of the stores in the street and rose a brow. Weren't you guys already getting late for a dinner at the Uchiha's house? A moment of silence caught them, before Naruto and Shisui flew off from the ground. Mikoto-sama, Basan is going to kill us. They screamed and ran so fast that not even the dirt and dust cloud following them could keep up. The remaining duo of teacher and student shook their heads. Those two were the worst kind of siblings, two brothers always at each other's throat, a mere chemical mixture meant for chaos. The blonde and raven-haired duo ran so fast that they almost crashed into the door of the Uchiha's estate, but they somehow managed to stop themselves just a few feet in front of the main gate. Naruto's was doubled over with his hands on his knees while trying to catch his breath when Shisui heard the sound of rapidly closing in footsteps, of a certain someone coming their way. Quietly he moved behind Naruto, without the blonde noticing, and prepared a foot behind the blonde's legs. And as if it was a cue, the door sprung open and a small dark-haired child flew out with a large grin on his face. Naruto-san. He screamed the top of his lungs, and the blonde looked on his horror as he tried to take a step back, but felt himself falling back over. And just as he was starting to lose his footing, the horrifying entity, known as the Sasuke bullet, flew into his gut, making him fly back and crash into the ground with a loud thud. Naruto landed on his back, wheezing, as all air was punched out of his lungs, and he laid groaning on the ground with a still grinning child sat on his stomach. Shisui roared out laughing, as if it was the new trend, before proceeding to point at Naruto with teary eyes. That's for the door you dumb shit. He yelled and kept on laughing so hard that he fell down on his knees and repeatedly slammed his fist into the ground. Naruto glared his way. You're so dead now, I swear I'm going to kill you slowly and brutally, Shisui. He wheezed out before his head fell back on the ground with a groan escaping his lips. Sasuke, who had initially been amused, while looking at the scene, started looking down at Naruto with a nervous sweat drop falling down his forehead. Naruto-san, are you alright? Never been better, the blonde wheezed out, making Shisui cry out, laughing even louder. What's wrong, pal? You look a little pale, Shisui cried, the tears flowing down his face as he found it hard to breathe due to laughing so much. Naruto decided that his revenge would come soon enough, so he gathered his strength and took a deep breath before moving Sasuke away from his stomach. A little warning next time would be good, Sasuke. The child looked a bit flustered as he scratched the back of his head while the blonde got off the ground. Naruto poked Sasuke on the shoulder and made a "follow me" motion with his head as the two started to walk in through the front door. Shisui, who had gathered himself as well, walked a few feet behind the two, but just as he was about to enter the door, it was slammed into his face. Again, Shisui howled in pain, and rolled backward down the few stairs while clutching his now bleeding nose. Oh, you didn't. He tried to yell, but the sound was muffled due to him pinching his nose to stop the blood from running out of his nose. Naruto chuckled with tears in his eyes as he turned around the hallway. But the sight before him made him want to run out of the house in an instant because what he saw sent shivers up his spine, and made his legs quiver in fear. In front of him stood a stunning fair-skinned woman with long, straight black hair with bangs hanging on either side of her face to roughly frame her cheeks and black eyes. It wasn't that she was stunning that made him scared. Oh no, it was the blindingly happy smile that was on her face, and the cold aura of death, cascading into a hyena mask behind her. Oh, it's so nice of you to join us tonight, Naruto-kun. Did you perhaps have any other plans for tonight? She asked all too sweetly, as she moved closer, making Naruto's fear increase tenfold as he tried to move backward, but his back hit the wall while his teeth were chattering. And no. Naruto chuckled out nervously while looking at the dangerous woman in front of him. As if it was the password, the aura of death along with the hyena mask disappeared in an instant, and Mikoto's smile turned natural. Good. She giggled and moved back into the kitchen with Sasuke in tow. Sasuke looked between her and Naruto, as the blonde fell down alongside the door with a sigh of relief. What was that about, Ka-chan? What do you mean, Sasuke-chan? Mikoto asked as she stirred the content of a pot on the stove. Sasuke hummed and looked at Naruto, who was still sitting on the floor. Why was Naruto-san shaking so badly? He asked, tilting his head inquisitively. Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I just greeted him, and everything looked fine to me, right, Naruto-kun? Mikoto asked, with the cold aura returning momentarily. Naruto nodded rapidly as he flew back to his feet, resolutely ignoring his cold sweat drops. See, Mikoto said with a smile, looking down at her youngest son who just sweat dropped at her with an amused look. Taking his chance to escape this nightmare, Naruto took off his sandals and snuck into the dining room behind Mikoto's back, just to come eye to eye with one Uchiha Fugaku. Good evening, Fugaku-san, I'm sorry for being late. Naruto apologized, with a small bow. The man's cold eyes stared at him for a few seconds, making Naruto gulp as he feared that what he had predicted before coming here were becoming reality. But his worries seemed to be for naught. It should be alright, my wife isn't done cooking anyway, Fugaku said, as his eyes returned to the papers he had laid on the table. Naruto's brows flew upon his forehead in surprise. Fugaku had just acted casual with him. What kind of witchcraft was this? Is everything alright, Fugaku-san? Naruto asked in a careful manner, as he tried to read the stoic Uchiha clan head's body language. Fugaku looked up with the same stoic face, and asked, "Why shouldn't it be?" "Don't know, I was just asking, to be friendly," Naruto explained, making Fugaku nod before his eyes wandered down to his papers again. Naruto shook his head in disbelief and excused himself to go find Itachi. That was odd. Back with Fugaku, the man merely stared with narrowed eyes toward the blonde's back. When dinner had finally been served, Naruto eagerly looked at the dishes in front of them in delight. He had a feeling that he knew why his favorite food was being served, but he wouldn't complain. Nope, not at all. They were all seated around the table now. Fugaku was placed at the end of the table at his usual spot, and Naruto sat with Itachi on his left, and Sasuke on the right, while the latter had his mother in front of him, and Shisui placed to her left. While the table was set with a variety of dishes, Naruto's favorite had to be the fish that had been marinated in miso soup, and for Sasuke's sake, there were several more child-friendly dishes as well, a lot of them involving tomatoes, which were the young Uchiha's favorite thing to eat. Dinner was a quiet affair. Everyone was just focusing on their meals until Fugaku decided to say something. "So, how'd your mission go?" Naruto kept himself from speaking, simply believing that the question was meant for Itachi to answer, which he did. "The mission went without trouble. Naruto-kun and I dealt with it in under an hour. The time-consuming part was locating our objective," Itachi answered, making Fugaku nod with a satisfied look. He wasn't smiling, but he didn't look as stuck up as he usually did. "I trust everything went fine on your end as well?" Fugaku then asked, but the table was utterly silent. Naruto took some of the miso soup with a spoon when he suddenly realized that Fugaku's eyes were looking toward him of all people, so he laid down the spoon and looked around to notice everyone's eyes were on him, and he coughed into his hand and responded. Yeah, no problem encountered here. Everything went fine, and nothing bad happened," Naruto answered while being a bit shocked, or rather, he was really shocked. Fugaku had never asked him a question like this before, so this was, indeed, a surprise. "Very well then," Fugaku said with a short nod and returned back to eating. But the older man didn't miss the curious and questioning glances he received from his wife, sons, and Shisui. Naruto rose a brow and leaned to his left and whispered to Itachi, "Hey, is your dad acting weird or is it just me? It is quite surprising for him to act nice toward you, I'm afraid, but I have no idea what has caused it," Itachi said with a calculating gaze. Naruto scoffed and played a bit with his food. Perhaps Mikoto-san beat him with a belt or something. Itachi snorted at the image appearing in his head. "I highly doubt it. I'm sure she'd love to, but the marks it would leave behind would surely cause questions around the compound." "So you're saying that if it wasn't for the image it would give the clan, she would have done it?" Naruto asked, surprised. "Their marriage isn't what it has been, and even while saying that, I'm not sure it has ever been as delightful as Okawa-san hoped it would be when they signed the contract." Itachi sighed and returned back to eating. Naruto's brows rose in surprise at that. Mikoto and Fugaku's marriage was a contract. That would certainly explain a lot of things, especially how someone as kind as her would be with someone as grumpy and rude as him. Naruto shook his head and returned back to eating, but before he'd take another bite he made a polite smile toward Mikoto and said, "The meal is delicious, thanks for inviting me." The older woman gave a soft hum, and smiled at him. "Why thank you, that's kind of you to say, you're always welcome to join us." "Right, Fugaku. Fugaku. Yes, what she said." The man coughed into his hand, making almost everyone at the table roll their eyes at him. Naruto shook his head, and returned to his conversation, I'll keep that in mind, and I apologize for not being over much these days. I've had a lot going on these days, especially since I've been trying to learn one of my father's jutsu. Anyhow, with such delicious food on the table, you might start throwing me out of the house because I ate it all. Flatterer, at least someone appreciates my efforts in the kitchen, Mikoto said with a big smile. Despite her happy smile, Naruto couldn't miss the glance sent toward the end of the table. Arranged marriage, huh? He pondered and started to see a lot of things he wasn't able to see before. Of course, he wasn't blind and had seen quite a few times when Fugaku and Mikoto didn't agree on things, and arguments had certainly been heated as well. And it all made him wonder, why did this arranged marriage occur? And why did Mikoto agree to it? Was she the one who requested it? A lot of questions were filling his mind right now, and he was curious about the answers. Fugaku paused for a moment, before continuing on with his dinner, only taking a moment to blink, in disinterest. Dinner continued with idle banter as it finally came to a close before Fugaku spoke up. Itachi. Shisui. Tonight, there will be a clan meeting. Be sure you attend. After saying as much, and receiving 2 nods in return, he stood up, and took his leave, taking brisk, yet controlled steps, out of the room. Finally, everyone else stood up, with Naruto helping Mikoto with the dishes, mostly to appease her wrath, and got ready to leave. Once the dishes were away, Naruto and Shisui began to leave towards the front door, while the rest of the family saw them out. Sasuke was a simple case. He got a quick hug and had already run off to his room as he yelled, "Bye." Itachi shook his head at his little brother's antics. It was quite un-Uchiha-like, but it was a refreshing change. He didn't disapprove, nor did he approve. Safe trip home, don't get into any trouble. Geez Itachi, how much trouble do you honestly believe we can get into on our way home, of all places? Shisui snorted and crossed his arms across his chest. Considering it's the 2 of you, and together, nothing in the village is 100% safe, Itachi smirked, making Shisui's brow twitch. You're just as annoying as Naruto, if not more so, Shisui smirked back, and Itachi just chuckled. As if that was possible. He retorted. I'm standing right here, you bunch of assholes. Naruto growled and elbowed Shisui in the gut. Shisui doubled over, and coughed out, why was I the only one getting hit? Because I don't trust Itachi to be caught off guard. Naruto shrugged. Touché. Shisui wheezed out. Itachi looked on amused as he put out his hand, which Naruto took. Good trip home, don't be a stranger. I won't. I'll see you at our next mission, which hopefully won't be too long before we're deployed again. I'm going to need a good stress relief after tomorrow, Naruto said, and Itachi nodded before he gave his excuses and left as well. Shisui noticed that Mikoto looked at Naruto like she wanted to talk with him, so he quickly bid her farewell and said his thanks for the food before he left, and while he was doing so, he signaled to Naruto that he would be waiting outside. Naruto just nodded in response, before turning back to look at the raven-haired woman. Thanks for inviting me, and for the food obviously. You're an amazing cook, tastes better than anything I could ever make by a long shot. He grinned. Mikoto gave a soft smile. Flatterer, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. In a household filled with Uchiha, it's a nice change to hear it, anyhow. Anyhow, it was nice seeing you. I hope you take care, especially for tomorrow. I'll make sure to visit after you've left, as not to intrude. Mikoto said with sorrow-filled eyes. It wouldn't be an intrusion, but that's your choice. Thanks, and see you next time. Naruto responded with his back turned, and waving his hand. Of course, however, personal time is important, especially for tomorrow, she argued back, making Naruto shrug with half-lidded eyes. Anyhow, Thanks for today, I enjoyed it very much, Naruto responded, but before he could leave, he was engulfed in a warm hug. As my son said, don't be a stranger. It's displeasing when you stay away, your company is delightful and required. She said with a small grin, making Naruto just scratch his head while being flustered. I'll try to come over more often. Jane. He waved, which she returned. Naruto walked outside and met Shisui standing up against a nearby lamppost. As the pair began to walk away, the taller of the two spoke up, so, do you want me to come with you, tomorrow? Taking a deep breath, and a moment to center themselves, a responsive, no, I can handle it myself, but thanks, was finally delivered. Kanahagakure no Sato, graveyard. As the wind flowed through the area swaying his hair along with the leaves, his eyes never left the three flat stones in front of him. He was crouched down in a daze, his eyes glazed as if he wasn't there at all. People walked through the area, paying their respects before they left again. It almost seemed like he had been there the entire day to most people, which he had. He had been sitting in the same position since dawn, not moving a muscle. The three stones in front of him were what he had been focusing on before he lost himself to his train of thoughts. The first two stones had two names engraved, names that had once meant a lot to him. They still did, perhaps even more so now. Uzumaki Kushina, Namikaze Minato. He still remembered it as if it happened yesterday. An impressive feat, considering he had only been 5 when it had happened. The emotions he felt, the terror he experienced, it was burned into his memory. The last stone had an entirely different name engraved. It was a smaller stone, placed in the middle of the two other ones. Uzumaki Menma. That name. It saddened him the most. It was a person that died too early. A person. His life had been over before it began, he never managed to live or experience anything besides death. Menma Uzumaki, it was his little brother. It was a boy that should have meant the world to him around now. He mourned his loss, but he mourned the loss of never getting the chance to know him better. Maybe it made him cold that he didn't miss him that much, but it was hard to miss someone you never knew. He could only miss and grieve over what he wanted them to be. Siblings. He had smiled the day that he had heard his mother proudly proclaim that she was pregnant again. He had wanted to grow up strong, to protect the unborn child inside her. He wanted to be strong, brave and loving for the kid that would, at some point after 10 months, become his sibling. He had wanted to be able to teach him so much. His training had started early, and he had worked hard so that he could be somebody that his little sibling would be proud of. But he never managed to figure out if he would be proud of him. Because he died. Just like his parents. He wondered every day if they were watching him and if they were proud or ashamed of him. He mostly believed it was the latter, because, despite the love a parent always would have for their child, he had failed that night. They had died right there in front of him, gasping their last words out in from him, while he was unharmed. He had done nothing as they died, he had tried, but he had been too scared to move. If anything, his only actions had caused their death. He had only seen his little brother alive for a few minutes. He had failed to do the one thing that was required of him. If anything, he has caused the death of the very person that he was responsible for protecting, if only he hadn't screamed. Naruto shook his head, trying to avoid thinking about his nightmares as he looked up at the skies. It was around noon now. He had been here since dawn. Getting down on his knees, he noticed his muscles crying in discomfort. He had been crouched in an uncomfortable position for over 6 hours after all. He leaned forward and folded his hands on the ground while leaning his forehead down to rest it on top of his fingers. I'm sorry for my failure. There isn't even one day that goes by where I don't regret being the cause of your deaths. I'm sorry I wasn't the son or brother you needed in the end. Sitting back up, his gaze fell upon the bundle of flowers that he brought with him, the same bundle of flowers that he brought every year. A white rose and carnation, a crimson rose, surrounded by a purple and blue hyacinth, and lastly, 3 daisies for each of them. Wiping his tears away as he stared, once more, at the graves in front of him, I understand if you'll never forgive me, I wouldn't forgive myself either. Just promise me that you are together up there, taking care of each other. As he opened his mouth to say something else, he was interrupted by someone's voice beside him. You know, I'd kick you if it was my grave that you were sulking in front of. You'd be scaring all the hot girls away. Naruto absently looked up with a blank face. It was Shisui standing there. But the expression on his face was unusual. Despite him smiling, the smile was sad and filled with sympathy. Taking a deep breath, Naruto decided to prod him. What are you doing here, Shisui? I recall myself saying that I'd do this on my own, he asked in a monotonous voice. And you should know that I'm a better friend than that. You're hurting, man. What kind of friend would I be if I let you cry on your lonesome? I kept my distance for a while so you could have your personal time, but after a while, it was clearly obvious that you were just torturing yourself by staying. How many times must you be reminded that what happened was never, and never will be your fault? Shisui asked, with a stern gaze. Naruto's eyes glossed over as he returned to staring at the gravestones in front of him. Specifically his little brother's. But it was my fault. If I had just stayed away, or better yet, kept myself quiet. I failed them, him. After a second Naruto's eyes widened as he was sent flying to the ground with his cheek stinging. Had the bastard just punched him? What the hell? Naruto snarled as he looked at Shisui, but was shocked to find an enraged expression on the teen's face. Before he could do anything he was picked up by the collar. How can you say that you failed him? True, you might have made a mistake, but what could you have done? You were just 5 years old, man, you were just a kid. But you have been here, every single year on the anniversary of both his birth and his death, since it happened. You come here and tell tales and stories. You tell him about the world around his resting place, and you tell him about how much you would have loved to know him, teach him and love him as his brother. Do you honestly believe he could ever wish more from you? Shisui asked, his voice quiet now as he put the blonde down. Naruto gave a dry chuckle and looked at the graves. I just miss them so much. Shisui put a hand on top of his shoulder, and sighed, I miss my parents too, but there is nothing we could or can do to change what had happened. Now the only thing we can do is hope that they are together wherever they are, and make sure to visit them to let them know that we're okay and that they shouldn't worry about us. I guess you're right. Thanks. I think I needed a wake-up call. Naruto admitted and tried to rub the tear stains from his face. Shisui gave a sly smirk. Oh, no worries, I'll gladly punch you whenever I get the chance. You just had to ruin it, didn't you? Naruto asked in a deadpan, as his eyebrows began to twitch. I have no idea what you're talking about. A day later, in the Hokage's office, Hiruzen dropped a folder on his desk with a heavy sigh. So this is the reason you want him to go on this mission? The old Hokage asked the man standing in front of him, who nodded. Yes, it would be beneficial to the village, but also to him. The man spoke calmly, without any emotion present in his voice. I'm not sure, Danzo. With today taken into consideration, it might not be the best time, Hiruzen spoke, while Danzo merely gave a snort. The old warhawk sat down in the chair in front of the Hokage's desk, and said, Trust me on this, Hiruzen, it's the best time for it. Taking his current emotions and the probable thoughts running through his head, he'll be more than motivated. I can't argue with that. But I would have liked if you had gone to me in the first place. Coming with this to me now is a bit late, and I would have been able to make some more preparations beforehand if I had known earlier. Hiruzen sighed and lit up his pipe. Danzo nodded. That is true, but I wouldn't have come to you with a mere rumor which would have left disappointment in both you and him if it had been proven false. Feeling like sighing again, Hiruzen flipped the folder open again and stared momentarily at the contents within before closing it. Alright, I'll put him on this mission. Hopefully, they'll be able to make him happier than he is now. The boy is a shell of his former self. This should prove beneficial in his recovery. Danzo said. Recovery? Hiruzen then asked with a raised brow. Why yes, the boy has lived through a lot of trauma already. He needs this to heal. I fear that not much else will do. Danzo then replied calmly. Very well then, you are dismissed, Danzo. I'll send for him immediately. Hiruzen finished, and Danzo left without saying anything else. Bore. Hiruzen called out, and a large muscular man landed in front of him, wearing the ANBU uniform. Hokage-sama, the man addressed, and Hiruzen pulled his pipe away from his mouth. Go fetch Uzumaki Naruto for me. I have a mission of the utmost importance for him. Hiruzen ordered, and the man left with a brief nod. Naruto walked into the Hokage Tower with a stretch of his arms and back. It was early in the morning, just around the peak of dawn. He wondered why he had been summoned so soon. It hadn't even been 2 days yet since his return to the village from his last mission. Rubbing his eyes with a groan, he was kind of wishing that he had gone to bed earlier last night, but then again, he managed to make a ton of progress regarding all of the notes that his father had left behind. Despite feeling like a failure to his family, he wanted to at least make sure that the things that they were proud of weren't forgotten. Even if he didn't feel worthy to read them at times. But negative thoughts aside, he had learned a lot. He was finally feeling like he was getting closer to the goal, and was getting quite ecstatic about being done. It did, however, also leave a sad feeling inside of him because he didn't know what to do when he was done. He would have finished the project, and would then need a new one to spend his free time on. Well, there was also his novels and fishing he could turn to, but despite how much enjoyed doing those things, it was the life of a shinobi that was his passion. He wanted to explore the world and learn the various jutsu and techniques found within it. He couldn't do that if he was buried in a book or sitting by a lake in the shade of a tree. Regardless of how much he enjoyed doing just that, shaking his head to clear him of all these thoughts, Naruto yawned loudly as he arrived in the waiting room, making the receptionist giggle at him with a hand in front of her mouth, something that caused the blonde to blush in slight embarrassment. Sorry, he grinned sheepishly, realizing he had just done that without noticing that she was there. Where had his shinobi skills run off to? Oh, no reason to apologize. He is waiting for you, please enter. She responded with a smile, making Naruto just cough into his hand before turning around to avoid any more embarrassing interactions. Trying to rub the sleepiness out of his eyes again, Naruto opened the door in front of him and entered swiftly, before closing it behind him. You wanted to see me? Naruto stated more than asked, to which the Sandaime nodded. Why yes, there is something that has come to my attention, something that I want you to take care of. It is a mission, and the length may vary quite a bit. It can be anything from a month to 3 because it is mostly a spying mission. Hiruzen said, making Naruto's brow raise. Despite being ANBU, it wasn't often that he of all people was sent to spy on someone. What's the details? Let me know, and I'll go get in my uniform. Naruto said, making Hiruzen shake his head. This isn't an ANBU mission, it is a political mission in which you will act as an ambassador. This might be confusing, I know, but let me explain. Hiruzen said, making Naruto just nod his head in silence. There is a family of 2 in Kusagakure, which is currently being treated horribly from the people of Kusa. The family consists of a mother and daughter, where the mother is said to be on the verge of starving, constantly taken away from home against her will only to return exhausted and bleeding later in the night, which in return makes the child grow up alone in a house that barely functions. Hiruzen stated, reading just a few out of the many points from the folder that Danzo had presented him. I can understand that you want something done, and I will, but how is this of any concern to Konoha? Naruto asked curiously. Hiruzen sighed, because the two people might as well be from a clan that is almost dying out, one which two of our former cages were quite close to. I see, so to save this clan from extinction, I'll have to do what exactly? Naruto asked. I want you to spy on them and gather evidence concerning their treatment. When you have enough evidence gathered, Kusa will be forced to hand these two over. Despite having evidence here, it was gathered by the people under Danzo, and I'm sure that you can remember our talk about them. Hiruzen said, and Naruto just nodded. Yeah, nay, he responded. Exactly, my boy. Now, because the Foundation is a shadow organization, we can't use this information because of the chance that it might cause Danzo's organization to become public. Despite how much I'm against them, I can't disagree with how useful they can be. This, for example, would never have come to my attention without their help. Hiruzen admitted. Naruto sighed, and asked, anything you can tell me about the people I'm supposed to watch? Hiruzen this time smirked. Oh, you'll know enough from the moment you lay eyes on them. And I'm sure it will also grant you more than enough motivation to see this mission a success instead of a failure. I trust that you'll take care of this. Hiruzen smiled and handed the mission scroll to Naruto. Despite being confused, Naruto did a short nod of agreement. Yeah, I'll do it, no problem. Do I have permission to speak on your behalf on this mission? Of course, you've never given me a reason to doubt your political skills before. Despite the many times that you've found yourself in one so far in your short life. Hiruzen stated, in a manner that seemed proud. Naruto smiled. All right, I'll leave in an hour. Naruto bowed and turned around to leave. Naruto, Hiruzen called, making the blonde turn his body halfway to look at the old man. Let's do a training session when you get back, I want to see how good you've gotten. You got it, I'll blow that hat off your head, no worries, Naruto smirked, and left in a shunshin. Despite being told that it wasn't an ANBU mission, Naruto still clad himself in his ANBU uniform with the exception of the mask. Since the uniform was purchasable in almost every shinobi store, it didn't matter much if he wore it on this mission. The only thing making an ANBU official was his mask and tattooed emblem. Pushing his sword into its sheath placed on the ANBU vest's back, Naruto reached for his mask, but then remembered that he didn't have to wear it for this mission. So he made a short, mental, victory dance, before grabbing a dark gray cloak with a hood and swinging it across his shoulders and buttoning its collar. His reason for wearing this was simple. In the off chance that he was found out during the spy session of his mission, he could somewhat escape without having to reveal his identity. Normally, some people could show their face and still make it away, but considering how recognizable his face was, it was very unlikely that nobody would put two and two together and figure out who he was. Looking into his fridge, Naruto frowned heavily. I just bought all this food, and now I have to throw it out when I return. I should make a seal to make my food stay fresh for even longer. Naruto grunted, and closed his fridge as he grabbed a notepad on the dining table. The idea he had wasn't half bad, so he settled for writing it down for now, and decided to work on it sometime after he got home again. He already had a foundation to work with, thanks to the standard preservation seal. Hopefully, this wouldn't take 3 months. Mikoto would kill him for staying away from them for that long. There's only so much leeway that his love for sealing will give him, and being distracted with a project for multiple months is well past that point, according to Mikoto-san. Maybe he should visit the compound and tell her in person. That way it couldn't get too bad since she would know what he was up to, after all. Then again, that would probably lead to her finding a way to distract him. Since this seal isn't as important, she'd probably tell him to just eat over at the compound and forget the, clearly, unnecessary seal. Chuckling at the thought, Naruto closed the fridge and went out the front door, followed by shutting and locking it behind him. Walking down the stairs, he sighed and took a sharp turn toward the Uchiha compound in the distance. He wanted to at least tell them about his missions in person so that they wouldn't have to think that he was avoiding them or something that outrageous. Leaping over the market district, Naruto landed in front of the gates leading into the Uchiha compound. But he was raising a brow when an arm moved in front of him. Looking to his left, he stared at the gate guard that blocking his entrance to the compound. "Is there a problem, Daiki?" Naruto asked calmly, as the large man going by the name of Daiki stared down at him with a colder glance than what he was used to. Because of Naruto's frequent visits, he had gotten what most people would call a free pass into the Uchiha clan's compound. He had never been stopped like this, so this was quite strange indeed. "State your name and reasons for entering," Daiki responded in a monotone voice, making Naruto's brows raise further upon his forehead in great surprise. "As you know, my name is Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, in case that somehow also slipped your mind. You might want to get a doctor's appointment to check that head of yours if you somehow have forgotten it after all the years I've come here. And I'm here to tell Mikoto-san that I'm leaving for a long-term mission. So can I please enter now?" Naruto sighed, looking at the man as if he had lost his head. Daiki snorted at the comment, and said, "Show Mikoto-sama some respect and we might consider letting you in to talk with her." "Okay. Now this was some bullshit. Oh great Daiki-sama, please let me enter to speak with Mikoto-hime." Before Naruto knew it or Daiki could burst out in anger, the blonde was pushed through the gate from behind. "Stand down fellas, Blondie is with me." Naruto immediately recognized the voice and stared at his daily pain in the Shisui. Shisui jogged up beside him with an amused gaze. "What was that about?" "You tell me, I just wanted to enter so I could speak with you guys." "But Daiki is being an even greater asshole than normal," Naruto said with a calculating look. "Was every Uchiha acting odd these days?" Shisui snorted and intervened his fingers behind his head as he walked. "Well, he might have a stomach ache. He ate quite an exorbitant amount of food at the clan meeting yesterday. Serves him right then, he's being an asshole." "Touché." The two walked in silence until they reached the main estate, when Shisui asked, "Yo, what did you want to tell us by the way?" Naruto looked to his side and shrugged. "I have an extended political mission, that's all I can say for now. I might be gone for a month, maybe 3 months. It could be more or less, that depends on how long it takes for this matter to be solved. Considering it's a political matter, and you're a representative from Konoha, it shouldn't take too long. Konoha has a lot of pull in political matters, it should be a walk in the park." Shisui reassured and clapped the blonde on the shoulder. "Let's hope that's true because I'm going to be bored out of my mind otherwise." Naruto groaned with an annoyed expression, with his lips pressed together to form a line. Shaking his head, Shisui reached for the doorknob, but stopped and smirked as he looked at Naruto. "Wanna bet on how far she is going to throw you?" Naruto's eyebrow ticked at that. "Why would she throw me at all?" Shisui shrugged with an innocent look. "Oh, maybe because you just got back and are already leaving for maybe 3 months." Naruto gulped. "Shit, wait a minute then. I need to." But Shisui acted like a deaf person, and all but kicked the door open. "Mikoto-sama. I'm here, And I brought Naruto with me. You did that on purpose. Naruto grunted as the color slowly drained from his face, and Shisui just winked at him. Stepping inside, Naruto and Shisui took their sandals off and spotted the raven-haired woman stepping around the corner in a cooking apron. Good. Then I'll set a plate for one more for lunch. She smiled sweetly. Shisui then turned and smirked at a sweating Naruto, who was adjusting the collar of his cloak uncomfortably. I can't stay. I'm just here to let you know that I'm going to leave on another mission today. Mikoto frowned heavily at that, but you just got back. I'm afraid I have to. It's a political mission. I was selected for this mission. Naruto answered with a sigh. Shouldn't Itachi be with you then? Mikoto asked confused, and Naruto just shook his head. Nah, it isn't ANBU. He replied, making her take a deep breath before sighing heavily. I guess it can't be helped then. When will you be back then? She asked, hoping that it wouldn't be that long. Naruto gulped and scratched the back of his head. Oji-san told me that the length can vary. It can take all the way from a month to 3 months. 3 months? She yelled while getting all up in his face. Yeah, it's not that bad. Naruto nodded in response. Stepping back, Mikoto crossed her arms and stared at the blonde teen. Not that bad, Naruto, you just got home. You need to take a break. I will. Just. When I get home. He chuckled dryly. Mikoto gave an annoyed sigh, and dropped her arms back down as she walked into the kitchen. You men are hopeless creatures. Shisui raised a brow at that. Hold on, how is now on all of us men because Blondie can't figure out how to take a break? Because both him, Itachi and you, never, ever, take a break. You three are constantly either training, going on missions, or doing something else taxing. When was the last time you just sat down and read a book or took a simple walk? She asked skeptically. But that's boring, Shisui groaned out with a roll of his eyes. You just proved my point. The woman snorted and walked into the dining room with today's lunch. Shisui gaped a little at that, trying to find a comeback when he was suddenly clapped on the back by Naruto. Well done, moron. Who the hell are you calling a moron, you idiot? Shisui yelled, but his sudden retort had a completely different effect than what he had intended because Naruto had already disappeared from behind him, so Shisui had just yelled at himself through the mirror that was placed in the hallway. Naruto in the meantime had entered the dining room and gave a short but respectful bow toward Fugaku who was seated at the end of the table. Fugaku-san. He greeted, and the man nodded in return. Naruto-san. He responded back and waited for further words coming from the blonde. The look on his face told him that there was something that he wanted to say, after all. Could I please speak with Itachi in private for a minute? I won't take too long, he should be seated with you within the next 5 minutes. Naruto requested, and the clan head just waved him off. Itachi is in the backyard with Sasuke. Please hurry, as I intend to enjoy lunch with both my sons before it's cold, Fugaku said. Naruto nodded and walked out through the glass sliding door leading toward the backyard which was already open, while still trying to figure out what he had done for Fugaku to act nicer than he had been able to before. Shaking his head free of those thoughts, Naruto gave a short wave as the raven-haired brother duo spotted him. So, this is where you're hiding. Itachi snorted, and rose a brow at him. What's with the cloak? I got a new mission, I'm leaving in just about 10 minutes. I came by to say it in person, thought it was the least I could do. Naruto informed, and Itachi's brow remained on his forehead. Don't you mean we got a mission? And if that's the case, I'm honestly baffled since I haven't received a word about it. Itachi responded with confusion evidently dripping from his monotone words. Naruto shook his head with a small smirk. Afraid not, it is a political matter, and for some odd reason I've been picked for it. I must say I'm surprised as well. You're the last person I would pick for a delicate political matter, Itachi said with a small smirk. Naruto's sweat dropped at that. Geez, thanks for the trust. Itachi shook his head. On a serious note, I'm sure you'll be fine. How long will you be away from the village? Most likely between 1 and 3 months, Naruto said back. And my mother is okay with that? Itachi asked in shock. Naruto chuckled bitterly. I wouldn't say that. Oh, the silent treatment. Itachi then questioned. It's more like she left after she heard all that she needed to hear, Naruto said and shrugged. Itachi gave a bitter laugh at that, and placed a hand on his hip while patting Naruto's shoulder with his remaining hand. I suggest you come back with a souvenir. Why? Naruto asked, his brows flying upon his forehead. Let me just say it in a simple way. This is the first phase of my mother starting to give you the silent treatment. So unless you want to live through phase 2 and 3 of her being mad at you, I suggest getting her a gift, as that might be an option for getting her into a good mood again. Itachi finished, and Naruto mentally noted this down as the largest amount of words he had ever heard Itachi say in one go. Alright, I'll keep that in mind while I'm there. Naruto nodded and crouched down to look at Sasuke. And I trust you'll keep your family safe while I'm away. Naruto winked, making Sasuke nod with a big smile. Sure, somebody's got to do it, Sasuke said, making the two older teens chuckle a bit. I'll leave it to you then. See you guys, Naruto called as he turned around and started to leave while waving his hand. Don't start the next Great War. He then heard Shisui yell from the porch. I'm not the one yelling at his own mirror reflection. Naruto yelled back and vanished in a shunshin the instant he saw the enormous tick mark on Shisui's forehead appear, one that would predate a large outburst. With Itachi, several hours later, the raven-haired teen kept a blank face as he kneeled down in the middle of the room. He kept his eyes locked on the floor as he heard the Hokage speak. Alright, I've informed the people here about the crucial information that you needed to share in greater detail, Hiruzen said, and Itachi raised his head to look at the people that Hiruzen had selected as his advisors. More specifically, it was his old teammates. This claim is quite outrageous. Are you absolutely sure that the Uchiha clan is committed to this course of action? Koharu asked, looking down at Itachi from her seat. Itachi nodded briefly. Hi, the Uchiha clan is very devoted to this cause already. It required no more than the first and second meeting to confirm this. While they had had a meeting the night where Naruto was there, they had also had one in the morning. This can prove bad for us in the village. What course of action should we take, Hiruzen? Homura asked as he adjusted his glasses. Hiruzen sighed and tried to respond, but Koharu beat him to it. Isn't it obvious? If they are going to start a revolution and usurp our power, we should have no choice but to judge the Uchiha as traitors of Konoha. Hiruzen intervened, and said, please wait, Koharu, don't rush to such a decision just yet. However, Hiruzen, from what I can understand already, the Uchiha clan will not be dissuaded, and since that is, in fact, the case, we have to take measures to avoid mayhem. That includes innocent children too. Danzo said, looking at Hiruzen with a narrowed eye. Don't say such things in front of Itachi. Besides, a battle against the Uchiha would be far from an easy task. We must plan our strategy very carefully. Hiruzen reminded, but Itachi was as blank as it had been when he had entered the room. We're in a race against time here. We are to strike them preemptively before they can make their first move. If we both join forces and use our respective black ops to launch a surprise attack on the Uchiha from behind, we'll end this fast. Danzo stated casually, making Hiruzen grimace. The Uchiha are comrades in arms. We need to watch them for a while longer than just hearing about 2 meetings Danzo. They might withdraw, and we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. And anyhow, I would like to use words first before violence. I'll come up with a strategy. Hiruzen finished with Danzo and turned toward Itachi. Itachi, it doesn't have to be for long, but please, buy me as much time as you can. He finished, and Itachi nodded. For the sake of the village, as well as the Uchiha, I will go beyond my limits. Naruto sighed quietly as he finally reached his destination. It had been around a day. He had traveled at the fastest speeds that he could without getting too exhausted. Landing on a branch, Naruto crouched down and looked over the grass fields of Kusagakure no Sato. After a moment, he reached into his cloak, grabbing a picture and holding it up to compare it with his surroundings. And there were already bad signs that made him frown. The house he was supposed to watch, he'd guess was located over 500 yards away from Kusa's main wooden wall surrounding their village. The house itself was practically in shambles. The only lighting in the house was candles. There were no signs of lamps or anything inside the house. At least from what he could see from his position. There was a well beside the house as well, suggesting that their water was coming from there and not the village's pipelines. The next thing he noticed was the shitty condition that the house was in. It was built with boulders and cement, definitely not the work of a professional. The roof was constructed from dried straws, with no hint of insulation underneath. The windows were cracked with some even being broken. How can they live like this? Are they really that poor? Naruto wondered and moved down to a branch closer to the ground to be able to see everything with a better view. From his new position, he could spot the 5 poorly hidden shinobi that were watching the house. Judging from their masks and uniform, they were from Kusa's ANBU. He snorted at that. If this was their best attempt to hide, they weren't even worth calling ANBU. Narrowing his eyes, he started to wonder. Why would they watch this old house that was about to collapse? Did they know about the clan and status of the people within? If they did, it made no sense. How could they even allow themselves to let these poor souls live in this dangerous house? He didn't get it and needed answers. Giving a silent groan, he defeated the urge to go down and poke the ANBU closest to him on the shoulder, and then throw a fist in his face when he got his attention. He was a spy on this mission, at least for now. But this situation, despite how horrible it was for the people he was supposed to watch, was good for him. The house was located outside of Kusa's walls, so when he presented the evidence, he couldn't get held back by Kusa. If it had been inside their walls, they might have been able to accuse him of being a spy, but the house's position was perfect. It was simply located in the country. They couldn't even charge him for trespassing. Shaking his head, he reached into his shuriken pouch and grabbed a camera that he had brought along. He momentarily wondered about how it wasn't scratched at all by his shuriken, but quickly shook his head again to clear his mind from these odd distractions. He quietly started to take pictures of the house and its surroundings. The house's structure, lack of insulation, the cracked and broken windows, the lack of light and water coming from the village, and to connect it all to Kusa, he took pictures of all the hidden ANBU that he could, and even managed to get a picture of one facing toward his direction, next to the house. Thanks to that, it was possible to see the emblem of Kusa's shinobi scratched onto the top of his mask, as well as them being placed around the house of question. He now basically had everything he needed except for a few things. He had detailed pictures of a bunch of the things wrong with the place that they lived at, and also an overall picture to link it to Kusa. Now all he needed was to wait for the more extreme kind of abuse, which could take a while. Naruto gave a yawn a few hours after. He had been sitting still on the branch for quite a while, and the ANBU from Kusa hadn't moved either. He was about to close his eyes for a nap when he heard the sound of a loud creaking door and looked down at the house. Taking his camera up to his face again, he waited for the person to step outside the door so he could get a picture. But as his eyes spotted the person's features and face, he almost dropped the camera. His body was shaking, his lips quivering as his eyes found it hard to focus on anything else but her. As his breathing got heavier and faster, he placed a hand over his heart and thought to himself with a whimper. No, she's supposed to be dead. Keika-chan. Naruto stuttered, his eyes fixated on the red-haired woman walking out with a basket filled with what he would guess was laundry. Holding up his hand to shield his vision from the sunlight, his eyes kept following her until he finally noticed it. Her hair was darker than Kushina's bright red, her eyes were red, and this woman's hair had a little more spike to it. Naruto's breathing got slower and slower as he stared at this individual. He smiled bitterly, as a lone tear fell from his eye. It wasn't her. This had to be the reason that Hiruzen had wanted him to do this. It was because the clan that was being mistreated was the Uzumaki clan. Kneeling on the branch, his smile turned into a frown. His mind had tricked him, and given him false hope. He had almost believed that Kushina wasn't dead, and standing right in front of him. He had been ready to run to her, embrace her in a hug and tell her how sorry he was. But he had been robbed of all of that. The person in front of him wasn't his mom, no, but it was still a member of his clan. So despite everything, they were still family down the line. Family. The word made Naruto narrow his eyes as he glared at the back of one of the ANBU watching her. How dare they treat his family with such disrespect? Letting them live in this house that was ready to collapse, invading their privacy, and everything else he had yet to see. While fighting the urge to commit a full-on slaughter of the ANBU watching her, he noticed something that made his worry and confusion come back in full. On her arm were several teeth marks. It covered her entire arm, all the way from the end of her short-sleeved shirt, and down to the start of her wrist. Some of the markings were even overlapping. Grabbing his camera again, he took a picture of it and was about to place it back in his shuriken pouch, when he looked at the clothes she was wearing. Well, if you could call what she was wearing clothes. The things she wore, Naruto would call white and red rags. Taking another picture of that, Naruto heard the door creak again. Raising a brow, he looked at the door and realized he had momentarily forgotten one important thing. It was a mom and a daughter that he was supposed to watch. So as the door opened, Naruto watched with great curiosity as a small child, no older than Sasuke, stepping outside of the house. He smiled a bit, because of the huge smile she wore as she ran up to her mom. He chuckled a bit at the sight. Her mother was trying to do laundry in the basket that she had pulled up from the well, but the child was running around and distracting her. So, she was an energy bomb, a typical Uzumaki. Taking a picture of the duo, Naruto finally stuffed the camera back into his pouch and decided just to watch for a while. He needed to keep his distance, for now, no matter how much he wanted to go down and greet them, but with the ANBU watching, he couldn't take the chance. He sighed a bit, he also wanted to just go down there and take them with him to the leaf. But he didn't have enough evidence yet. What he had gathered was just evidence of being poor, not the evidence on the abusive treatment he needed. The only thing suspicious was the ANBU watching. What made them so special, aside from being Uzumaki, that required an entire squad of ANBU there? He would have to find out. But they couldn't be there forever, there had to be an opening when they were being replaced by another squad. Maybe by then, he could go down there and greet them. He grunted at that, it might not be the best idea to do. He could also just place some supplies on their doorstep, knock the door, and then shunshin away. With how starved they looked, it couldn't hurt. So he made his decision, and sat back against the trunk of the tree but kept his eyes glued onto the duo while keeping his guard up. It wouldn't be so good if the ANBU managed to spot him and get to him. Would it? As midnight came around, Naruto opened his eyes with clear irritation. Pained screams from wounded soldiers had kept him awake the entire night. He had finally fallen asleep around a few hours ago, and now in the middle of the night, he was once again awake because some weak plastic soldier was too much of a wimp. If that sissy asshole doesn't shut the hell up soon, I'm going to blow up the hospital, Naruto muttered to himself with a twitching eyebrow. Yawning a bit, as he felt nature calling, Naruto swung himself off the branch he had been napping on and landed on the ground without a sound. Alright, I'll just leave for 2 minutes, and have a clone watch them in my place and then, what's that? Naruto thought to himself as he saw 3 Junin coming from the village, and toward the Uzumaki's house. What could they be doing here in the middle of the night? Naruto whispered to himself and got ready to capture any potential evidence he needed. The Junin at the front upon reaching the house proceeded to kick the door open. The remaining 2 proceeded to enter the house, and not even 5 minutes later, the same red-haired woman from earlier was pushed out of her own house. What the hell are they doing to her? Naruto growled with narrowed eyes. He wanted to commit a massacre right now, but that wouldn't help anyone. Ka-chan. The cry of a child brought him back to reality, and he shook his head and proceeded to get the remaining evidence he needed. He watched as the small girl he had been observing with her mother earlier ran out of the house with tears in her eyes. The girl didn't manage to get within 10 feet of her mom before she was ruthlessly slapped to the ground. Get back into your house, you little shit. This whore has work to do. One of them snorted. As her mother saw this, she forced herself out of the grip the 2 other Junin had on her, and rushed to her crying kid on the ground. But before she had any time to comfort her, she was grabbed and pulled by the hair, and thrown back to the 2 Junin again. The 2 grabbed her by the hair, and held her in place. You know the deal. Unless you want to see your daughter as the primary womb for your clan, you're going to cooperate with no objection. That was the deal from Ryujin-sama. The one that had slapped her daughter said. Naruto grabbed the hilt of his sword angrily, but grit his teeth and let go with heavy motions. Taking a few deep breaths, before stating to himself, alright, mission first, then I beat the shit out of them. I do need to know how much to make them suffer, after all. It wouldn't do to go too easy on them. Naruto growled to himself while feeling the intensity of his rapidly building bloodlust. When the situation had proceeded to one of the 3 Junin locking the young girl inside the house, and all 3 of them walking away with the mother, Naruto decided it was almost time. Only one thing to figure out now. What were they doing with her? Before doing anything else, he quickly made a clone, giving it the very important task of dispatching the ANBU and looking after the little girl, as he narrowed his eyes towards the Junin who were making their way towards the village proper. One way or another, his mission was ending today. Quickly, he began to follow the small group as they made their way into the village, and towards the annoyingly loud hospital, noting how the mother looked more and more resigned to her fate the closer they got before they finally arrived. Upon arrival, the Junin that was dragging her then proceeded to physically throw her into one of the rooms, where from what he could see, dozens of injured shinobi began to line up. Making sure to completely remove his presence, he moved close enough to view what was happening, and he found himself thanking Itachi. If it wasn't for him, he wouldn't have had enough patience to continue. Anger bubbled within, as his family member was used as a chew toy for the various shinobi that had lined themselves outside. And from what he could sense, every bite from the injured consumed a notable amount of chakra from her. Slowly, if only to keep his anger at bay, he raised the camera, making sure to take enough pictures of the cannibals, but that brought a new question to mind. There were a significant number of injured, but Kusa wasn't at war. What was going on? Once he had enough evidence, he quietly made his way into the hospital, specifically looking for the hospital records. There had to be something going on, for Kusa to have more injured shinobi than even Konoha did on a busy day. And given how they had her treat the ninja, it was likely a common occurrence. If his fears were right, then this should be the nail in the coffin to deal with Kusa and ultimately protect his newfound family. Surprisingly enough, despite the dozens of shinobi that were present at the hospital, security was scarce, scarily so. Almost like this was a common occurrence, and that nothing substantial was going on. Hell, the few med nins that he found were lazing about, almost like they lacked any patients to treat. Finally, after traversing through the hospital for a few minutes, he had found the room which held the medical records. There was only a single staff member around, and they were making their way towards the break room. This didn't make sense. If there were so many patients to treat, shouldn't they be making records of the various problems that the patients have and why they came in? Stealing his resolve, just in case his fears were indeed true, he opened the cabinet that held the records for today, and he was left dumbfounded. 53 files were recorded, all within an hour of his target's arrival. And 53 cases of training-related injuries. Not a single injury was from a mission, or anything critical. No, if anything, most of these injuries were obtained, with the knowledge that they would be injured in the first place. From purposefully poisoning themselves beyond how much they can normally handle, to training in semi-lethal sparring matches. This just didn't make sense. Gritting his teeth with a snarl escaping his lips, as he roughly opened his cloak, pushing the documents inside as he quickly crossed his fingers, making a clone that quickly disguised itself to go look after the Uzumaki mother while he made his way out of the hospital undetected. Making his way to the office of the leader in Kusagakure, Naruto's appearance got a large number of curious stares due to his almost obvious lineage, and the Konoha forehead protector that was hanging from his belt. Standing at the front of the quite small building, compared to the Hokage Tower, that the leader apparently worked in, Naruto walked up to two guards that immediately stopped him. I am here on behalf of Konohagakure, and got a message for your leader that cannot wait. You're here with no words from your Hokage, you are trespassing on Kusa ground, pal. The first guard sneered, making Naruto's expression turn into a large scowl. Either you tell him that I'm here, or I'll simply walk in there myself. You should be willing to let an ambassador from the greatest nation enter, consequences could come if you don't. Naruto threatened, sending a glare at the guard. Little brat, tisk, fine. The man grunted, obviously not okay with this kind of treatment. That's what I thought. Naruto clicked his tongue as he walked past the two guards, noticing they followed him all the way up to the door. The leader supposedly was behind. Opening the door without as much as knocking, Naruto waltzed right into the office, staring at the middle-aged man that lifted his head from some paperwork laying across his wooden desk. The man narrowed his eyes at Naruto, and who are you supposed to be? How did you get past security? Pulling all the files and evidence he had gathered, Naruto slammed them on the man's desk, as the two guards behind him moved dangerously close. You are housing two members of the Uzumaki clan in this village, and I on behalf of Konoha was sent here to investigate rumors about their mistreatment, Naruto responded, getting straight to the point. This is an absurd claim. Guards arrest this man immediately, he is trespassing on this village's soil, and making dangerous political assumptions. Konoha will have to pay dearly for such treatment of our village. The man said in a low dangerous voice, and the two guards moved in to grab a hold of the blonde. Channeling a bit of his chakra, causing the tension in the air to get thick and heavy, Naruto glared out of the corner of his eyes at the guards, that seemingly stopped in place as he displayed a dangerous warning: mistreatment, inhuman living situation, medical experimentation, forceful abduction from home by your shinobi. This woman is in a life-threatening danger in this village. Along with her daughter. Naruto finished, turning his head to face the man again. The man showed off his gritted teeth as he looked over the obvious evidence, laying across his desk, while looking dangerously at the two guards, behind this intruder, that was stuck in their place. So I, Uzumaki Naruto, with the authority of Konoha, take these two into my custody and under my protection. If you have any further disclaim of this evidence being true, and any more words you feel that needs to be said, feel free to take it with Hiruzen-sama. Naruto said simply, eyeing the man as he grabbed the edges of his desk, seemingly cracking the wood under his fingers. Konoha has no right waltzing into this village making such assumptions. This is trespassing and could be seen as an act of terror or worse, war. Was the response Naruto got out of this. So, you'll deny the obvious and decide to play the political game with Konoha, I see. Can you really afford to make such dangerous acts toward the greatest of the 5 nations, the ally of Tsunagaku no Sato, that's also one of the great nations? Naruto asked calmly, his eyes still cold as ice. Ryujin-sama, let's call backup and put this freak behind bars. One of the guards that had gotten out of shock said, latching onto the blonde's arm, as he stared dangerously at the blonde. Let go of the ambassador, and go send word for the two Uzumaki, Ryujin responded in a low tone, his hair hanging in front of his eyes, covering them as he stared downward at the desk. The guards blinked in shock, but, our Ryujin-sama, he's an intruder. You got an order. The man said in a low but sharp tone, making the two guards flinch before moving out of the room while glaring at the blonde shinobi. What's your source of information? The man asked as he and Naruto were alone in the room. Naruto frowned, crossing his arms over his chest, unimportant. That's a big lie. You cannot waltz into here and make a mere assumption without any credible source of information, Ryujin responded coldly. I have no more words to say in this case, my mouth is sealed by Konoha, any further conversation will be done between you and Hiruzen-sama, Naruto responded simply. Ryujin chuckled, lifting his head to stare into Naruto's eyes. Hey, so just as I suspected, you are just one of Konoha's lapdogs, barking without biting on their command. You should be careful speaking about Konoha like that in my company. Your situation will be worse in any political matter now. We house the Yamanaka clan, a clan able to dig these memories out in any matter that may come. Do you think it will suit you well for this to be taken into consideration during the process? Naruto responded easily. You got a lot of nerve. Ryujin sneered, his teeth grit tightly together as his fist clenched with anger, turning his knuckles white. But before anything else could be said, the door behind them opened with low creaking noises. Turning his head around, Naruto's heart clenched painfully in his chest as he watched the tired and exhausted Uzumaki mother with black marks under her eyes walked in slowly, holding her daughter's hand as the small girl hid behind her mother's leg. Our Ryujin-sama, you called for us. The mother stuttered in barely a whisper, fiddling uncomfortably on her feet. Sighing with an annoyed expression, the leader of Kusa snarled out, yes, Akari, you got a visitor. Deciding that as his cue to speak, Naruto turned around with a small smile. Hey there Akari-san, I'm an ambassador from Konohagakure no Sato, a former ally of your fallen country. I'm here to take you into Konoha's custody. But, why, have we done a crime against you? She asked confused, squeezing her daughter's hand as the young girl looked at this blonde man's appearance with curiosity. Chuckling, Naruto crouched down, completely ignoring the leader of Kusa and his two guards that had also returned, as he looked at the girl hiding behind her mother's leg. No, nothing of the sorts. We got knowledge of you being mistreated here, and with you being Uzumaki we cannot allow that. Former allies or not, you've always been a people close to us, so I'm here to take you somewhere safer. Shinobi-san, we are citizens of Kusa. Yes, I'm well aware of that fact, but with the mistreatment, Ryujin-san has no choice but to allow me to you to Konoha, unless he wants to be utterly demolished in a political matter that won't be good on any parts, Naruto explained, making the mother look at him with surprise and disbelief. Ka-chan, who is this man? Her daughter suddenly asked, seemingly not having listened in on the conversation. This is. Naruto facepalmed and shook his head as he walked over and extended his hand. How rude of me, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, shinobi and ambassador of Konoha. As Akari was just about to shake this young man's hand, her movement froze as she heard his name. Staring at this blonde boy in disbelief, she opened her mouth. You Uzumaki? Yes, I am. I know the hair color might be confusing and all, but my father was blonde, but my mother was indeed of the Uzumaki clan, Naruto explained kindly, his gaze shifting back to the woman's daughter. And who do we have here? He asked softly, crouching down to extend his hand toward the girl. Looking up at her mother, she asked permission to introduce herself to this man without saying a word, but her gaze was more than enough for Akari to understand. Go ahead, sweetie, Akari encouraged with a smile, her head still filled with utter surprise at realizing they weren't the last of her people. Nodding slowly, the child extending her much smaller hand to the blonde as they shook. Hello mister, I'm Uzumaki Karen. Karen, That's a pretty name, Naruto responded, smiling kind and politely. Blushing a bit out of embarrassment, Karen took her hand back and clutched to her mother's leg. This has gone on long enough. You were here to take these people with you, so if that was all, get out of my sight. Ryujin roared out, slamming his fist onto the table, startling Akari and scaring Karen. You should mind your tone, there is a child in the room, Naruto snarled back, his eyes glowing with danger. I told you to get out. With pleasure. So, if the two of you want to come with me to Konoha, all you got to do is say the words. Naruto said, shifting his gaze turning back to the Uzumaki duo. Looking at her daughter, Akari noticed that the child was still looking at this blonde boy with great interest before she eventually nodded. Please take care of us, Naruto-san. Very well then, we shall be on our way then. Got anything that you want to take with you back to Konoha? Naruto asked. Nodding her head, Akari scooped her daughter up into her arms. Everything we have here is not of the best quality exactly, but it's all we got and we have no money to buy anything new. I live in a very big house. My father was the Yondaime Hokage after all, so we got space. If you want to come to live with me, I wouldn't mind having my family close after so long of being alone, Naruto responded politely. Widening her eyes with sorrow and hurt, Akari gazed at the young blonde. Alone? Where are your parents? I know the Yondaime Hokage died, but what about your mother? Died along with dear old Tu-san, I'm afraid, but it's okay. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his golden locks. Nodding her head, unable to find anything to say, Akashi smiled softly. If it isn't too much trouble, we'd like to stay there until we can afford our own place. I'll help you as much as I can around the house and pay you as soon as I can. Excellent. You can stay for as long as you want. I got tons of space and I'm usually not home too much anyhow, so you'll have plenty of privacy, but no need for payment. Your family, and this is exactly what family is for. Naruto smiled, walking over toward the door, motioning for the two to follow him. As the united family members left the office, the Uzumaki mother tearing slightly up. In the lands of Kusa, the three Uzumaki calmly traveled toward the border between Kusa and Hai no Kuni. The trip had been filled with small talk. Or it was rather Naruto constantly asking curious questions regarding Uzushio and the Uzumaki culture. Hours were slowly passing by as they made their way out of this hostile country. The journey was slow and so far uneventful. They managed to get close to the border with no surprises. Yet, Akari was more than happy to answer all the things she could. As they were in the middle of a conversation about how the Uzumaki had gotten such knowledge and interest in seals, they were suddenly interrupted by the third Uzumaki, the youngest member of the party. Karen. Feeling a pull at the edge of his cloak, Naruto blinked and leaned forward to curiously stare at the young glasses-wearing girl that looked up at him with such an intense expression on her face. Are you my Aniki now? Naruto blinked a bit before his eyes widened and almost fell over. That word had a lot of meaning, especially to him and his past. It was unexpected that she would call him that, hence his sudden reaction of quietness and flabbergasted shock. Karen. Akari started with her eyes widening dangerously. A small blush on her cheeks from embarrassment due to her child's unpredictability. After somewhat recovering, Naruto shrugged and chuckled much to Akari's confusion. I guess I am, he responded calmly with a small smile, his finger busy scratching his cheek sheepishly as he looked slightly uncomfortable. The entire scene made Akari unable to hide a few giggles slipping loose of her lips as she watched the scene unfold.